What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, your home for the 2020 World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined as always by Daniel Starkand. And Daniel, I got to check in on you. You had a rough week for the Dodgers, 3-3. The Lakers get bounced in the first round. You holding up okay over there?
Yeah. Like you said, it's been a rough week. I'm also a little under the weather the last few days here. So it hasn't been the best week, but hey, we're looking forward now. The Dodgers got what should be an easy week coming up here, so it should give them a good chance to pick up some wins. And I'm hanging in there. The Lakers loss was unfortunate, but the writing was kind of on the wall with them with all the injuries all season. So I wasn't as bummed out as I thought I would be. But yeah, we're hanging in there, ready to talk some Dodgers. It was, not the best week, not the worst. But yeah, I feel like this upcoming week will be a really telling one as far as what direction this team is going to head in.
Absolutely. The Lakers didn't lose to the Clippers in the playoffs, so at least we have that. I've got some Alex
True,
Caruso and
true.
THT free agency thoughts, but I'll save those for another time. But let's dive in on the Dodgers. As I said, 3-3 week against the Cardinals and Braves. They maintain the third best record in the league, although that's also the third best record in their division. 3 back of the Giants, who have won 7 of their last 10. 1 back of the Padres. For what it's worth, the Dodgers have the best run differential in the National League. But here's the plan for today. We're going to do a quick little week in review, go through the 6 games, and then we're going to dive into what I think maybe is the most interesting topic in baseball right now, which is the conversation around banned substances. We have some great quotes from Dave Roberts, great quotes from Trevor Bauer, as well as some spin statistics and numbers coming off of Bauer's start. And then we'll get into some other big storylines. Max Muncy hobbled, Clayton Kershaw, rough stretch of outings, Blake Trinan's weird season, Brusdar Gratterall update, which is not an encouraging update. We'll end with some stock up and stock down preview of the week ahead. But lots to get to. Let's start with what we just saw. As I said, Dodgers take 2 out of 3 at home against the Cardinals. They lose 2 out of 3 against the Braves. Here was how that played out. Monday, 9-4 win over the Cardinals. The notable moment there was Chris Taylor's 14-pitch, 3-run double in the 6th inning to break a 3-3 tie. They come back the next day. They lose 3-2 to the Cardinals. Blake Trinan takes the loss on that one. He pitches the 8th, comes back out for the 9th, ends up giving up a run. The Dodgers lose there. Wednesday, 11-run first inning and a 14-3 win. Bellinger grand slam caps it off. He has 6 RBIs in that first inning. Friday, 9-5 win over the Braves. Ian Anderson and Sean Newcomb, 4 2/3, 1 hit, 7 earned, 6 walks for those guys. And then Saturday and Sunday, a pair of losses. 6-4 on Saturday. Kershaw, 5 earned runs. The Braves bullpen, which had like an ERA of 5, goes 4 innings, allowing just 1 hit, no runs. And then Sunday, 4-2 loss. Dodgers just get 7 base runners all game. As you look back on those 6 games, is there anything that jumps out to you? Is there anything particularly memorable or kind of that makes you think differently about how things look going forward?
I mean, the first thing that jumps out is they played 2 pretty good teams. I'm not gonna say the best teams or
Yeah.
anything, but those are solid opponents, the Cardinals and the Braves. They faced some quality pitching, and I think the offensive numbers kind of reflected it. Like I'd say for the most part, the offense was quiet for the whole week. And I know when you look at the overall numbers, they're probably not bad, and that's because they had an 11-run inning
Yeah.
and an 8-run inning like mixed in there. But if you take out those 2 innings, like the other 60, 70 innings, however many it is, we're not good offensively. And the pitching staff wasn't great either. So I'd say the Dodgers are kind of lucky to be 3-3, considering all the circumstances. But at the same time, obviously, we're never happy with 3-3. So it was kind of a whatever, up and down type of week. But yeah, I feel like the offense needs to start picking it up here. That was my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, I mean, that was exactly what I was going to say. And what's weird is this has happened a few times before. I mean, how many times have we sat here either on a post-game show or in a weekly show and kind of talked about the rough week that the offense just had? The issue now is the Dodgers are basically healthy. I mean, yes, Corey Seager is still
Yeah.
out, but Cody Bellinger's been back, and he's been back for a week. Zach McKinstry's been back. AJ Pollock is back. So the number of excuses that the Dodgers have for the offense
Yeah.
sputtering, for the longest time, wow, wait till they get healthy. Wait, I mean, they're 90% healthy right now, still struggling. And so something to watch going forward. I mean, again, I'm not saying I'm worried about the offense long term. It's just weird. Like guys like Mookie Betts that you expect to be dominant, and we'll talk a little bit about him later, has struggled. He did have a pretty good week, on the whole, but in big moments kind of was disappointing. Cody Bellinger has struggled big time since coming back. Will Smith, not a good week. Zach McKinstry's been terrible since he came back. So lots going on the Dodger offense. Obviously, Max Muncy missing some games. Justin Turner slowing down. So I'll be curious to see kind of how this plays out. I mean, because if you're playing the law of averages, at some point, all of these guys are going to heat up at the same time because all of them are going to be due, and the Dodger offense is just going to go on a tear. But when you watch games like Saturday and Sunday, you're kind of like, it just doesn't feel. I mean, even Friday, they scored 9 runs, but they had like 4 hits or something in that game. So pretty rough stretch for the Dodgers offensively there, I think, is the big one. And obviously, shout out to the Chris Taylor at bat. We talked a little bit about it, but 14 pitches, 3 run up, like at bat. I mean, just an unbelievable at bat, unbelievable moment. It's an unbelievable at bat, regardless of context. But when you add in, it's in the 6th inning to break a 3-3 tie. Unbelievable stuff from Chris Taylor. So that's the week in review. Let's kind of go to our big deal, no deal segment, which is going to be a lot longer than normal, simply because there's a lot to talk about here. And what I want to focus in on at first is the use of banned substances. And we don't usually do this, but I'm going to read you some quotes from Dave Roberts. Then we'll get to Trevor Bauer specifically. But here was an exchange Dave Roberts had with reporters as far as banned substances. Daniel, I'll let you react to this afterwards. He was asked about Major League Baseball going to have pitchers checked for banned substances. Have the Dodgers talked about it internally? Quote, we have not talked about this as a team. I think there's things that are kind of coming out through the media, through Major League Baseball, through the Players Association. No one really knows how this is going to shake out. Guys are certainly aware of it. Our guys are in tune with the Players Association and information they're getting. There's a lot of chatter, but as far as addressing the team as a whole or a pitching staff as a whole, we haven't done that. Follow-up, have you checked to see which Dodger pitchers are using banned substances? Quote, I have not. I think guys are aware of what's going on and will make necessary changes. I think right now I haven't done inventory. The guys I trust to go out there and get outs, I'm going to continue to go to. Question, don't you want to know which Dodger pitchers might be using substances? Quote, no, I don't. I still think he's going to get outs and execute pitches. Do you think banned substances is cheating? Quote, I don't. I think that cheating is more of when rules are imposed or in place and you break them. I think we're getting to that point. As I do understand it, players that do get caught using a foreign substance that's not allowed by Major League Baseball will be deemed cheaters. But up to this point, I think the line is kind of blurred and players are going to use whatever advantage they can when things are blurred. Follow-up. Seems like some players are bothered by how openly pitchers are using foreign substances. Quote, there's certainly an art to things. I'll say this. When I was playing, guys were scuffing the baseball. You could deem that as cheating. It's a competitive advantage. There's gamesmanship to it and art, maybe not so blatant. But in every era, there's always position players and pitchers trying to get a competitive advantage. Last question. Unreasonable to ask players to follow rules if Major League Baseball isn't enforcing it. Quote, it's not just baseball. It's sports and life in general. If there's not distinct rules and consequences, people will push the limits. That's just the way the world and life works. I do appreciate Major League Baseball trying to enforce rules and consequences or penalties. I'm concerned of it being in place during the middle of a season. I don't want pitchers getting hurt potentially, so we'll see. Again, when things are in place and imposed, we will adhere. I know that's a long quote, long interaction, a lot going on. Your reaction to all this, again, you were a pitcher, so you probably have a better understanding of what's going on here. Obviously, we know that this is going on, rampantly in baseball. Your reaction to Dave Roberts' responses?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this subject. But I mean, I don't know exactly where I want to start here, but I feel like the stuff Dave Roberts said, I'm kind of on the same page there. Like, the timing of all this is very weird. Like, we're in the middle of the season. Like, guys have been using these substances all year. So, like, why are we cracking down now? Like, of all times, like, I get it that they, at the beginning of the season, they wanted to take samples of baseballs and stuff like that and gather all their research. But I think the rules have to be in place before the season starts. I don't think you could just come here at the beginning of June and say, all right, all of a sudden, if it, what you've been doing has been fine, but now all of a sudden we're going to start cracking down. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But as far as like the actual use of the substances go, I feel like it's pretty widely known that so many pitchers are doing this.
Yeah.
Like, and that's why we'll get to Bauer, but I'm not exactly sure why he's the one that's being singled out when he was the one when you go back, a few years ago, he was the one who was trying to tell everyone that this was happening and no one wanted to listen. So why wouldn't he start using them too? If
Yeah.
everyone else is doing it, if they're gaining that competitive advantage, why would I not do it too if there's no consequences at all? So I think MLB needs to just figure out where they want to go with this. Like if we're going to ban them completely, then that's fine, but let's make sure we're enforcing it with everyone.
Yeah.
Let's make sure the penalty is strict enough to the point where guys stop doing it. Because if it's just like a slap on the wrist, then that's not going to stop anyone. And also, I feel like it's hard to. I know they're gathering evidence
Yeah.
and such, but it's hard to know for sure like what's happening, who's doing what. Like there's more. It's more than just the pitcher that touches the baseball.
Yeah.
So like it's hard to come down on a guy if you don't know 100% that it was him doing it or what. So I feel like there's a lot going on here. There's a lot that MLB has to clean up to get this right. Um, but I'm not sure I agree with the way they seem to be going about it. The timing of everything just feels weird, and I just don't know how these steps are gonna clean up the issue.
Yeah, I will say this somewhat in defense. I do think Major League Baseball, from my perspective, has made it clear this season that this was going to be a priority of something they were going to crack down on. So I don't necessarily think that, like, I think the enforcement is changing in the middle of the season, but I don't think the rule and the emphasis is, if that makes sense. Like, I think from the beginning of the year, they've said, hey, we want to crack down on this. They were collecting samples. They made it seem like they were going to be investigating this stuff. Now, to Roberts' point, they haven't actually been enforcing it. So the question is like, if a rule has been in place and wasn't enforced for the first 3 months of the season, is it wrong to start enforcing it now? From my perspective, if you have made this a priority, then you need to do something about it. And I hear you. There's a lot. It's difficult, right? Because to your point, some stuff is legal, some stuff's not. Like they've said, like, is sunscreen, like, does that work versus some of this goof
Yeah.
type stuff? And some people, everyone's got their own opinion. Do you have to check every half inning? I mean, even watching Bauer yesterday, and this is just an example of every pitch. I think 70% is the number that I've heard guessed, the guys that are using. But the guy has the glove and he's rubbing his hand on like a part of his glove or whatever, or the brim of his hat. It's like some of this stuff is so obvious the way that they're doing this that it feels like, I mean, I don't know what else could be in your glove right there that you're just rubbing your hand on. So I do think there's probably a way to check gloves, to check fingers. Checking the baseball seems like actually the worst way to try and enforce this. Because to your point, who touched the baseball? If a guy has stuff on his glove, that's a lot easier. But following up on some of the stuff Roberts asked, he was straight up asked, do you think this is cheating? And he said no. Do you agree with that? Do you agree that I calling them banned substances, that's the way it was phrased. So is
Yeah.
using banned substances cheating in your estimation?
Mm-hmm. It is, but it isn't, because the reason I'll say it isn't is because everyone is doing it.
Yeah.
So like that makes it an even playing field, I would say. Like if there was one, let's say I'm just going to use the Dodgers as an example, and I feel like the MLB world is they're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
They're making the Dodgers like the poster, kids for this, when that's ridiculous in my opinion. But let's say the Dodgers were the only team using substances and no one else was, then yeah, it would be cheating. But when when every single team in baseball has multiple pitchers using substances, it's hard to say it's cheating, because while every team is benefiting it from it, they're also not, the opposite, because the hitters are the ones that are getting screwed here.
Yeah.
So it's cheating in favor of the pitcher while the hitters get screwed. But at the same time, it's an even playing field for every team. So I'm not putting it on the level of the sign stealing, like the Astros thing. And I know the Astros probably weren't the only team doing that either, but there's no evidence to show that every single team
Yeah.
has been doing it the way that you could definitely find evidence when it comes to the substances. So I mean, it's either it is cheating, but unless you're gonna clean it all up, I don't consider it cheating. If that makes sense, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I hear I think what you're saying is, yes, it's cheating, but MLB has allowed this to fester to such a degree that any
Right.
guy who's not using substances is being placed at such a disadvantage that
Mm-hmm.
it's hard. It's almost like, yes, it's cheating, but I don't blame the guys for doing it. It's almost what I
Right.
hear you saying.
Right.
To me, I kind of fall in the same camp. And again, we're going to get to Bauer in a moment. But we're talking about literally the question is, do you think using banned substances is cheating? I mean, the question is so hilarious, especially
Yeah.
when you consider the answer is no. Like the word banned is in the question. Like they are banned. So it's clearly cheating. To your point, MLB needs to do something. I have two follow-ups. You said, and I agree with you, the penalties need to be stiff. The way MLB has done this is basically targeted some guys in the minor leagues and put some substantial. How big of a suspension? Because let's say, I mean, the hardest part is being able to prove it. But let's say an umpire goes out, he looks at a guy's glove, and he finds some goo on it. And they take the glove, and they take it for testing, and it turns out to be something that is a banned substance. 10-game suspension, 15-game. I mean, we know with pitchers, especially starters, let's say, you do things in increments of 5 so that they're missing starts. Right. Is it 10 games suspension for the first time? Is it 15 games? Is it 30 games? Like, how long would you go to make this substantial enough? Because to be fair, a lot of these guys, the RPMs have started to come down just by baseball mentioning it. Garrett Cole's the other prominent one. Bauer, of course, is the guy that gets a lot of pub. There is even some Kershaw talk, which I think is ridiculous. But how big of the suspension do you think it needs to be?
Yeah, I think you made a good point that obviously it has to be different for starters and relievers because suspending a starter 10 games, that's only suspending them 2 games really. Yeah. Whereas, suspending a reliever 10 games, that's probably suspending them, 5 because let's say they pitch every other day. But I'm with you. I'd say 10 or 15, 2 or 3 starts. I think for the first time, that's a good, like, hey,
yeah,
you're not going to do this again because it's only going to go up from here. But even with that, it's hard. Like if you're going to suspend one guy, what are you going to suspend? Like if I guess what guys are just going to get better at hiding it or what? Like, I don't know, because from what we know and from different articles we've seen, I remember Eno Saris had something on this like over a year ago, and it had an anonymous quote in there that said 95% of pitchers are using some sort of substance.
Yeah.
And like you said, they're banned substances, but are they really banned? If everyone's using them and no one's gotten a penalty for them, how do you call it a banned substance? But yeah, I'd say for suspensions, I think 10 to 15 games is probably appropriate for the first one. Like you said, the spin rates are already coming down, so I think the warning alone is kind of already scaring some guys off, and I think that's a good thing because obviously no one wants to get suspended. So I think the warning alone is helping already. I guess we kind of got to see where it goes from here, because if these spin rates kind of stay down here, then maybe the problem is kind of already fixed. Maybe we'll start to see offense, go up the way it has. But yeah, I'd say I think 10 to 15 games for a starter is pretty appropriate for a first time offense.
It is interesting to see some of the spin rates come down because it's almost like we still need like 5 to 10 guys to get suspended, I think, for this to be real. Otherwise, baseball is going to kind of get lax and we're just going to be back in the same position. One last question on this, and this can be a short one. Do you believe Dave Roberts when he says he doesn't know which Dodger pitchers are using substances?
That's hard to say. I'm gonna say no. I don't believe that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I feel like you're the manager. Like it would be negligence of him as a manager to not have some sense. And I'm not saying he needs to sit Trevor Bauer or Walker Buehler or whoever down and say, "Hey, what are you using?" But between the bullpen coach and the pitching coaches, I mean, like these guys have to be aware of what's going on. So I'm with you. He says he didn't want to know, to be clear. I don't remember if he actually said he doesn't know, period. But anyways, okay, let's move on to Bauer.
Real quick, though, let me just say, when AJ Hinch tried to tell us that he didn't know about the Astros stealing signs, I wasn't buying that. So I'd look like a hypocrite to say I believed Dave here. But, I mean, what's he going to say? He's got to keep things on the down low, at least for now. So, yeah.
Now, let's get to Bauer. And there's 2 pieces to this. There's an article, Fabian Ardaya, and I'm sure other people wrote very similar articles reacting to Bauer's start yesterday. And to put things in perspective, as you pointed out, about 4 years ago, Bauer was the guy who came to Major League Baseball publicly in the media and said, hey, this is a problem, do something about it, And ironically, I believe it was the Astros particularly that he was calling out when he was like, hey, Justin Verlander miraculously signs with the Astros, and all of a sudden his velocity or his spin rate, all this stuff goes up and he becomes a better pitcher. He's like, wow, I wonder how that could happen, And so nothing happened. Baseball did nothing about it, and Bauer was adamant, like, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem. And he kind of took the moral high ground and said, hey, morally, I would not do this. Well, something shifted because then all of a sudden his RPM jumps up by about 400 in one start and stayed there in the 2000, I believe, end of 2018. August of 2019 through 2020 wins a Cy Young and into this year. And so here's some quotes from Ardia's article, just giving you numbers. And then I've got Bauer's responses to all of this. So Ardia's article says his fastball average velocity remained steady at 93.9 miles an hour. So velocity did not change in Bauer's start. Nearly identical to season average, but his average fastball spin rate, tops in baseball by a wide margin over each of the past 2 years, dropped by an average of 223 rotations per minute, which is wider than the typical range of outcomes for spin. His highest fastball spin of the afternoon was 2,762 RPM, below his average of 2,835 in his previous start. So just to repeat that in layman's terms, the single fastball that he threw the best yesterday was dramatically lower than his average for the season. Okay. And then Ardai continues, his fastball spin rate on Sunday was his lowest in a single start since August 2019, which is right before that rate increased by more than 300 RPM for a start against the Phillies, which has largely held, if not increased since then. Sunday, Bauer pointed to a 2018 campaign in which he had 2.21 ERA, 175 innings with a fastball that averaged 2,300 RPM. Roberts said he wasn't worried. So Bauer, when asked, hey, is this going to be a problem, basically said, hey, go back to 2018. My fastball was way lower than it even was today, and I was still good. Here were Bauer's quotes. Again, I apologize for the length, but I think there's a lot of good stuff in here. This is the interaction, part of the interaction. He was asked, what are your reactions on thoughts to MLB expected to crack down on the use of banned substances? Quote, I want to compete on a fair playing field. I think everyone wants to compete on a fair playing field. So if they're serious about actually doing something about the rule that's on the books, then that's all I've wanted for 4 years. It's nice to see them finally catching up to something I've been talking to them about for 4 years. We'll see what they do. Unfortunately, at MLB, a lot of times nothing gets done until their hand gets forced and it becomes a public issue. Hopefully the game gets cleaned up. That's all we want. We just want to know what the rules are, what's going to be enforced, and compete on a fair playing field. I guess the ball is in their court to see what they actually do. He was asked about his spin rate being down 223 RPM. Is it related to banned substances? Quote, I don't know. Hot, humid day in Atlanta. I just want to compete on a fair playing field. That's been the whole point this entire time. Let's get everyone competing on a fair playing field. If you're going to enforce it, then enforce it. If you're not, then stop sweeping it under the rug, which is what they've done for 4 years. Just like to see everyone be able to compete on fair playing fields so we can see who the best players are and who the best team is according to the given rules and enforcement of the rules. Last one. Have you heard anything from the Players Association or Major League Baseball about enforcement? Yeah, we've heard a whole bunch of stuff and it changes day to day. No one knows what the rules no one knows the rules right now, apparently, including MLB and the commissioner. It would be nice as players to know what rules we're competing by and what rules are going to be enforced. As everyone knows, a rule that's written down but never enforced is not a rule. So it'd be nice to have some clarity on what the rules of the game are that we're playing under, since it's changed about 4 times in the past week or so. Again, a lot there. His spin rate is down. I thought his answer in particular, when asked about his spin rate being down, is it related to banned substances? His response was, I don't know. I just want to compete on a fair playing field. To me, that tells me absolutely everything that I need to know. That is the answer that sums up everything. So let's talk about that answer, and then we can move to Bauer, spin rate, all that kind of stuff, big picture. What were your thoughts on, is this related to banned substances? Quote, I don't know.
I think he's made it pretty clear that he knows, and just the fact that he's saying he wants to compete on a fair playing field, that tells you everything you need to know right there. But it's hard to argue with anything he's saying there. Like he came out and said that this was going on, and they did nothing. So why would he play on why would he have worse circumstances than anyone else? Like, he just wants a playing field. So if everyone else is going to use substances, then he's going to do it too. Like, yeah. and I would do the same thing. Like, I don't want to be, if guys are out there getting better spin rates, getting better numbers, getting better contracts, why would I want to be the caveman over here, still doing it the old way that's not working anymore? Yeah. So he's right. And as far as what he said about MLB, how they're inconsistent, how they don't have a set rules, he's right about that too. Like, everything he said is right. But yeah, I think it's pretty clear that he's using substances. I don't know if anyone will argue that. Like, I feel like he didn't straight up come out and say it like, yeah, I'm using substances. But if you read into what he's saying there, I think it's pretty clear that he's saying that he's using them.
Now, one thing that's fascinating to me is I would say 90% of the time Bauer has handled this perfectly by saying, here's what's going on. You guys need to do something
Mm,
about it. You need to do, and to be clear, he didn't just say it once and then start using. Like there was probably a
yeah,
18-month to 2-year stretch where he was not
right.
clearly not using banned substances. At first, when he did start using banned substances, it was almost to prove a point. Like it was almost to say, do you want to see what banned substances do? Watch this. And then he starts
Yeah.
using it. All of a sudden, the fastball jumps up, right? I think the thing that I struggle with Bauer is he made it such a moral issue. Like, I believe there's a quote in our diet referencing an interview he did where, like, he said it was immoral to be using banned substances and that he would never do it. So I think that's the hard part. And I'm not even arguing with the idea that he did it. It's almost just like maybe he shouldn't have made the mistake of making that comment out loud. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's one thing.
Yeah.
So that's where I think, for me, that the idea that Bauer has become, and you referenced this earlier, has become sort of the poster child for this is so misleading because on one hand, he probably deserves that in the sense that he probably has benefited from this more than anyone. I mean, you can see it. It's not to say he wasn't a good pitcher, but he won the Cy Young last year. Like he was the best pitcher in baseball last year and is obviously clearly using banned substances. The flip side is he's the one guy who went out of his way publicly to try and stop this on the front end. So again, I think if I have one small criticism of Bauer, it's just you can't say that it's immoral to do this and then quickly go into using it consistently for multiple years.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I don't think he's trying to be the moral guy anymore. I
Yeah.
think that's the thing. I think he tried that.
Yeah.
It didn't work. If everyone else is going to be immoral, then why am I going to be the one sitting here suffering from having morals here? So
Yeah.
I don't think I think his opinion on that will be the same now. I still think he feels it's immoral, but I think he's just like, whatever. Like, if everyone else is going to do it, if there's not going to be any consequences, then why should I be the one moral guy
Right.
in all of this year? Like, he tried that and it didn't work. But yeah, I'm definitely with you. I think it looks a little bit hypocritical, but I mean, I get what he's doing. Just because if everyone else is gonna do it, why am I gonna be the one guy that doesn't, just to be moral? Like what
Yeah.
like what does that mean anymore? You know?
Yeah. I guess I'll ask the elephant in the room question. Are you worried that Trevor Bauer, without pitching banned substances, is going to be far below the dollar amount that he is currently being paid as the highest paid baseball player
Mhm.
ever? Again, he says, go look at my 2018 campaign, 2.21 ERA, 175 innings with a fastball that was way lower in the RPM. The counter to that would
Mhm.
be 2019, 2017, like some of these other years
Mhm.
where he wasn't that good. So are you worried at all? I mean, I would say in some ways it was encouraging because aside from walks, which, RPM has nothing to do with control. So
Yeah.
aside from that, he actually pitched really well yesterday against a good Braves
Yeah.
team. But is there concern in your mind that once he stops using these substances, which it seems like he has, or at least he is to a lesser degree, that
Mhm.
somehow he's going to move back towards an above average and not elite pitcher?
Yeah, I think we're just gonna have to wait and see. Like, we don't know. At the end of the day, like, we could see the data and stuff,
Yeah.
but we don't know how much that actually affects the actual performance. Like, we're just gonna have to wait and see. Like you said, like, it wasn't like he pitched bad yesterday.
Yeah.
The worst problem was the walks. So that has nothing to do with the spin rate. And who knows, maybe the substances absolutely could have something to do with that. Like,
Sure.
I think the spin rate isn't the only thing the substances help. Like, it probably helps your command as well. And that's what we saw. I think he walked like 4 guys yesterday
Yeah.
or something, which is pretty, it might be a season high. I'd have to look, but it's pretty uncharacteristic of him. Like, he usually walks one or two, but he's not just out there, walking every leadoff guy, kind of like what we saw yesterday. So I think we're just gonna have to wait and see. Like, at the end of the day, that was only a one start sample size. Yes, the spin rates on the fastball was pretty drastic. But his other pitches, like, they all dropped, but it wasn't as nearly as drastic as the fastball. So I guess we're just gonna have to wait and see. Like you said, him pointing to his 2018 stats was kind of funny because it was like that technically proves, like, yes, I can be successful without the substances, but that doesn't mean it's some guarantee. Like,
Yeah.
we have we have plenty of other seasons to look at where that wasn't the case as well. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure what to expect from Bauer moving forward, and that goes for other pitchers as well. Like, he's not the only one
Yeah.
doing this, so I'm sure it's going to affect everyone. Maybe we've been talking about all season about how the offensive numbers are at an all-time low. And we thought the main reason for that was them de-juicing the balls, but who knows? Maybe the substances are a bigger factor than the de-juice ball. So I guess we're just gonna have to see like league wide where this goes from
Yeah.
here. Our offense is going to start to pick up, which honestly, that's already expected. Like as the weather warms up, as the summer comes
Yeah.
around, like
Lots of
that's when
factors.
guys start hitting. So it's going to be funny when like that starts happening and everyone's going to say like the substances are the reason why, when in reality there's like a bunch of different
Yeah.
factors that go into this. But yeah, I think we're just in wait and see mode right now. I still think Bauer can be good. Maybe he won't be Cy Young good, but the Dodgers don't need that. Like give it, with all their other guys,
Yeah.
they just need him to be good. And I know the contract is a huge number, but as long as if he could get to his 2018 self, that would be totally fine with me. But obviously, there's plenty of other seasons to look at where it wouldn't be as fine, I'd say.
Yeah, yeah, and just to housekeeping. So the 4 walks was actually the 4th time this season he has walked 4. So there have been
Oh, no
days where the
kidding.
control has cropped up, but that is a season high. One other note, just about sort of banned substances before we move on. There was some talk about Kershaw, his RPM being down in his last start, and I think it was Mike Petrello. Apologies if I'm getting this wrong, but he made a good point. Which when you're looking at RPM, the key is to look at velocity with it. So the reason Bauer's numbers were so significant is because the velocity didn't change, but the RPMs did. So when people were saying, "Oh, Clayton Kershaw RPMs were down," well, his velocity was down too. And banned substances does not increase velocity; it only increases spin primarily. So if a guy's velocity and spin are both down, then that's normal. That's what you would expect. When velocity goes up and spin goes up, that is what you expect. It's when velocity doesn't change and spin goes down that I think is what to look for. So I'm with you. Again, I thought he was okay yesterday. More than okay. He was pretty good. But yeah, it's a wait and see thing. Obviously, this is going to be a big storyline. And again, like we've talked
Yeah.
about it, fair or not, Trevor Bauer is going to be the poster child of this conversation moving forward. I think Garrett Cole is another one of those guys. Josh Donaldson had no problem calling him out and saying,
Yeah.
hey, interesting, all his spin rate numbers are down. I believe the Twins play the Yankees and Garrett Cole this week, so that should be a fun one. But definitely something to watch. To your point, lots of factors will impact offense over the next few months, including warmer weather. So it's going to be hard to make a direct comparison there, but something to watch. Something to watch. So there you go. Let's
Mhm.
move on to big deal, no deal, sort of in a more standard, traditional sense of how we do things. And we'll start with probably the other sort of major story this week, which is Max Muncy. Dave Roberts said he's hopeful but not confident that Muncy will be back on Tuesday. This is what he said, quote, "I don't think it's serious. It potentially could affect Sunday." This is a press quote. Obviously, with Monday being an off day, just getting ready for Tuesday. Right now, I want to say he's day to day. That was on Sunday, I believe. And then he went on to say post game, hopeful but not confident he's back on Tuesday. We know this is a big deal, so I'll ask it this way. Who needs to step up if Max Muncy ends up missing a little bit of time for the Dodgers?
I think it's someone you mentioned towards the beginning of the show, Cody Bellinger. He hasn't done much since coming back, and I feel like you got to give him at least a couple weeks. Like the guy, this whole season's just been kind of screwed up for Cody. He came into spring training with the shoulder issue, couldn't do much, plays about 5 games in the
Yeah.
regular season, and then gets hurt. So I think it's going to take him some time, but eventually Cody's got to be Cody Bellinger. Max Muncy has been inarguably the Dodgers' best player, this season.
Yeah,
Let's say the season ended today, he's maybe a top 3, top 5 MVP
for
guy.
sure.
He's been great. And if he's going to miss time, you need someone to match that production. The first guy I think of is Cody. Another one is Mookie Betts, who is coming off a pretty good week from what compared to what we've seen throughout the year. He hasn't really truly like gotten hot yet, but those two guys, I mean, those are the guys who they're on the catalog at the beginning of the year. Like
Yeah.
those are the MVPs right there. And eventually those guys are going to have to step up. And especially with Muncy out, with Corey Seager out, some other guys not hitting as well. So yeah, I'd say I'm still going to give Cody a little more time. I'm not going to be like, oh, what happened to this guy? He's not hitting well in his first 2 weeks coming back from injury. But eventually, I'd like to see the old Cody Bellinger pretty soon here.
Yeah, when Muncy and Seager, everyone's healthy, there's bandwidth for one of those four, Justin Turner, Will Smith. I mean, you got those 6 guys, I would say, are kind of in a tier of their own offensively. And you basically say, hey, as long as 4 out of the 6 are kind of cruising, then we'll be fine. Like if a couple guys are going through a slump, no big deal. Well, right now with Muncy out, with Bellinger out, you've got those other 4. And realistically, I don't know if you could say any of the 4 like are performing well. Like again, Mookie Betts had a decent week. Chris Taylor had a good week, but Will Smith had a really bad week. Like Justin Turner's been okay. And then Cody Bellinger's been really bad since coming back. And so I'm with you. Obviously, it's a big deal if Muncie can't come back. He did pinch hit, I believe, over the weekend. So there might be, I think that's a positive sign, I guess, that Muncie was able to pinch hit. So hopefully with the off day today in Pittsburgh, he can be ready for that series. Again, these are weak teams, and you maybe say, well, no need to rush it. The Dodgers don't need to get wins, and obviously don't rush it. The flip side is they need to win these games. Like you can't, go 3-3 again against these two. Another bit of injury news with a big name Dodger fans are familiar with, Brusdar Graterol. Really fascinating situation with him. He was injured. He was on a rehab assignment down in the minor leagues. That rehab assignment ended, and then the Dodgers just sent him healthy down to the minor leagues. This was Robert's quote. Brusdar, obviously a huge part of what we did last year. He's going to be a huge part of what we're going to do this year. We just feel right now where he's at, it's finishing school. The arm is healthy, ball is coming out, but the slider not as consistent as it needs to be to get major league hitters out consistently. The sinker is not commanded the way it needs to be. I think that option allows him to have a clear path to go out there, pitch regularly, get the sinker down in the zone, continue to work on the slider. When he does that, I expect to see him. Asked how much of Graterol's issues are because he didn't throw during the offseason, this was the interesting part. Quote, I think that's a big part of it. I think some things were out of Brusdar's control, and some things, to be quite frank, were in his control. But it's where we're at right now. How do things go from there to there? This is what we feel is best for him and the Dodgers. So big deal or no deal that Graterol, healthy, is in the minor leagues at a time when the Dodger bullpen has not been amazing, although I think it's been pretty good of late. And clearly a little bit of a message being sent by the Dodgers to Graterol, some things they weren't happy about this offseason.
Yeah, I think it's somewhat of a big deal for sure, especially those Roberts comments about him not doing everything he could have in the offseason. Basically is kind of what he was implying. I don't know exactly what he means, but I think it was pretty clear, when Graterol got to spring training, and he was dealing with some injuries then too. But like what we saw from him to start the year, I think he only pitched like 2 or 3 times before going back on the IL. But he didn't look like his usual self, and even like his self last year, those things Roberts mentioned, like I think those were an issue last year too. Like even though if you look at like the ERA and such, and that wasn't that bad, and like he kind of became a fan favorite just because of how hard he throws and the energy he displays. But despite all that, like he didn't have good command of his slider last year. He wasn't striking anyone out. So I think this has been an issue basically ever since the Dodgers have had Graterol. I think it's good that they're addressing it. I think he could benefit from some time in the minors. He's got the stuff that he could go out there and strike out everyone. Like if he figures it out, it just hasn't happened to this point. In fact, he's basically striking out no one. Like he had one of the worst strikeout rates in baseball last year. So I definitely think there's some seasoning there to be had. He's still really young. He's 22, 23 years old, whatever. So I don't think the Dodgers sending a 22-year-old to the minors is anything to scoff over. Obviously, the name is what makes people be like, what? Like, why would Graterol be in the minors? He throws 102 miles an hour or whatever. Yeah. But I think he could benefit from this time, and hopefully, like Dave Roberts said, he's still going to make an impact this year. Like, it's not like he's going to be there all year. Totally. Hey, we'll see you next year. Let's see what improvements you made. No, like we'll probably see him in a month or so or whatever. But I definitely think those are issues that need to be addressed, and hopefully, it's getting taken care of in AAA.
Yeah, he is 22, and I've said before, I think last season was a bit of a mirage. I know the numbers on the surface were pretty good, and he had some moments in the postseason, but I thought the moment that kind of summed up his year perfectly was Tatis just about hitting a home run off of him that Cody Bellinger robs, right? So it goes down as a scoreless inning for Graterol, but when you're watching the game, you're like, he's not missing bats. That was loud contact. It just found a glove. I think that's a perfect summation of his last year. Did he allow a run? No. Okay, good. But did he deserve to allow a run? Probably. So I'm with you. And the stuff is there, but the strikeouts need to improve. And again, he's 22. Like, if we're being honest, the Dodgers are hoping that Graterol takes the baton from Kenley Jansen and is the dominant closer like Jansen has been for the next 6 years. And so the key is long-term with him. It's sending the message, hey, you've got to get your crap together. You can't be doing the immature thing. We know you're 22, but there's not excuses for some of this stuff. And it's also go to the minor leagues, get your confidence back, figure out how to mix bats, figure out where to get your command dialed in, so that, yeah, we don't need you right now. We need you 2 months from now. We need you 3 months from now. We need you in the postseason and in the years beyond. And so I think it's a big deal because the Dodgers are sort of publicly making it a big deal. Like Robert's
Hmm.
going out of his way to be quite frank, some of the things were in his control is substantial. And the Dodgers want him to know that, and they want everybody else to know that. Again, he was on a rehab assignment on a major league contract and then got optioned down to minors. So I think it's a big deal, but I think it's will be fascinating to see how he responds. Does he go down to AAA and just absolutely dominate, throwing 102 miles an hour past people? And can he
Yep.
come up to the major leagues and repeat is going to be a big one. Next one here.
And
Oh, go ahead.
real quick, just to close that off, like you said though, the Dodgers bullpen has been like pretty good as of late, so that's why they kind of had the luxury to do this. Like maybe 2 3 weeks ago when Price was out, when Jimmy Nelson was out,
Yeah.
all the other guys were not performing that well. Then maybe you can't really you don't really have the luxury to do that. But I think the fact that the Dodgers have the ability to send them down is just kind of a big deal in the sense that just the state of their overall bullpen is a lot better now than it was,
Yeah.
just a couple weeks ago.
Oh, I've got some Nate Jones and Phil Bickford takes for you later, Daniel. Just you wait. You know we weren't going to get through this without me pumping up my boy
Of
Bickford.
course,
So
baby.
we're going to get there. We're going to get there. Couple more here. We'll do one more serious one and then kind of a couple sort of fun ones, I guess you could say. Clayton Kershaw, fourth start in his last 7. He allows 4 or more earned runs. 3 of his last 5 with 5 earned runs, including 2 in a row now. That's going back to the start of May. So 7 starts since the beginning of May. 4 times he's allowed 4 or more runs, 3 of those 5 or more runs. He does have a great strikeout to walk ratio, 47-9 in 37 innings pitched. That has been good, but he's allowing 43 base runners, so the whip is well over 1. Big deal or no deal that this Kershaw is struggling. I mean, we know past tense it's big deal, future tense
Yeah,
big deal or no deal.
right. Yeah, that's just what I was about to say. Like it's all about what happens moving forward, I guess. Like if he comes out of it and puts together 3 4 good starts in a row, then you could say like, oh yeah, that was just a blip in the radar. Like maybe his arm wasn't feeling great. He had a couple bad starts in May and June. Like whatever. Like
Yeah.
that's not a huge deal by any means. But I mean, if it continues going forward, then yes, obviously it's a big deal. Like this is Clayton Kershaw. It's a guy who's never had an ERA above like 3.0 like in his entire career. And I don't know what his ERA is now. I know it's above that. So he's on pace to have like his worst season since his rookie year, pretty much. But it's also a contract year for him. So obviously he has that extra incentive. His future with the Dodgers is in question. And obviously if this continues and he has like a mediocre season, then everyone's going to start questioning like, do we want to re-sign this guy? He's obviously been great in the past. He's a franchise legend, but what are we going to get moving forward? He's getting up there in age. So I think it's all up to him. He has a chance to turn it around by being great moving
Yeah.
forward. And obviously that's still possible. It's Clayton Kershaw at the end of the day. He's had even, within this bad stretch, he's still mixed in like a couple of good starts there as well. I feel like it's kind of every other right now.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean it's Clayton Kershaw, so what? No, regardless of what he does, people are gonna make a big deal out of it.
Yeah, so to your point, his rookie season, 4.26 ERA. The only other time he went over 3 was 2019. He went to 3.03. Right now, he's got a 3.66 ERA. To me, when I did the post game show solo coming off of that one, and he had some hard
Mhm.
hit balls, which was not great. The flip side is 9 strikeouts and 1 walk. Like those are the types of
Yeah,
numbers that you typically look at. And
right.
sequencing was a big deal. In that one, he had 1 bad inning. He couldn't get out of it. He talked afterwards about, I can't believe I walked Acuna. That was the big one. And then Freeman hits, and then Albies hits, and then Riley reaches on an infield single, and then all of a sudden the whole thing gets blown open. So I'm not worried about Clayton Kershaw. I'm definitely not worried about banned substances being at any part of this conversation. Like this guy has been, his peak was well before banned substances were even a thing. So,
Yeah.
and clearly, like you look at his velocity and RPM and stuff, like he's clearly not, I don't think, taking advantage. He's also a guy that morally, I think, I don't know if he would go there, especially at this stage in his career. But I'm not worried about Kershaw. I know he's been struggling. And I'm not worried in the sense of like, I don't think he's going to be a 3.66 ERA pitcher for the rest of the year. Now, is he going to be a 3.1, 3.2? Maybe. Like that might be where he settles in at this stage of his career, but
Right.
he's not going to be a 4 or 5 earned runs per game guy moving forward. One other
Yeah, and when you look at it, like if Clayton Kershaw is your third starter,
Yeah.
which like with Bueller throwing the way he is, and Bauer, we'll see what the substance is or whatever. But you essentially Kershaw's the third starter on the team. So if he's giving you 3.1 ERA production as a third starter, like obviously you take that any day. I know by his standards that's not great,
Yeah.
but from a third starter, like that's as good as it gets right there. So as long as he could, like you said, float in that range and not be the 4 or 5,
Yeah.
earned run and outing guy, then the Dodgers will be just fine.
Okay, three more quick ones here. Dodgers are 7-13 in one-run games this season. Big deal or no deal?
It's unfortunate. I don't think it's a big deal just because I think over the course of the full 162 games, I think we'll see that even out. But just unfortunate because their record should be a lot better than it is if they could just, win at least a few of those
Yeah.
games. Um, you mentioned, I think towards the beginning of the show, you mentioned how they still have the best run differential in baseball, and that's because whenever they win games, they're destroying
Yeah.
teams, for the most part. But then when they lose, like they lose by 1 run. But at the end of the day, a win's a win and a loss is a loss, and that stuff doesn't matter. But yeah, they definitely got to be better in those 1 run games. They got to be better in extra inning games. I know they didn't have any this past week, but overall in the season, they have not been good in extra innings. And a lot of that just comes down to, fundamental type of stuff. Like
Yeah.
you don't always need to hit the big 3 run home run. Sometimes you just got to move a runner over. Sometimes you just got to come up with a big hit with 2 outs
Yeah.
or whatever. And the Dodgers just for the most part haven't been able to do that this season. So let's hope it evens out in the coming months here. We'll see. But yeah, it's definitely unfortunate. That's the word I'll go with.
Yeah, I mean, if they're 500 in those games, they're tied for the division lead, tied for the best record in the National League. So here's another one. Walker Bueller. He was asked about pitching more than 6 or more innings in every outing. I like this quote. 5 innings feels a little cop-outy. That's kind of the goal of mine. Obviously, I'd like to go further and do more, but 6 is kind of the new minimum. That's kind of how I'm trying to look at it going forward. I love that. 5 innings is a cop-out, basically, is Walker Bueller's quote. How big of a deal is it for the Dodgers to know that they're going to get 6 innings every time Walker's turn in the rotation comes?
Yeah, it's funny because like if you heard people talking about length like 10, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
like they'd be saying 6 innings is a cop out, or even like
100%.
7 innings is a cop out. Now I guess the bar has gotten so low that like 6 innings is giving you length. But I will give Walker credit, like that's the day and age we live in. That's what he's asked to do, and he's done it in every single start this season, which I think that shows consistency,
Yeah.
that shows maturity. Like sometimes you don't have your stuff at the beginning of a start and things spiral quickly, and next thing you know you're out of the game in the third inning. Like
Yeah.
the fact that that hasn't even happened one time and we're almost halfway through the season, like that's awesome.
Yeah.
I think it was John Morosi, I believe, tweeted this morning like the Dodgers starting rotation still leads baseball in innings pitched.
Wow.
And they also have the fewest walks,
Despite
which
bullpen
that's
games.
pretty impressive right there. And also, it becomes even more impressive when you consider the fact that over the last month,
Yep.
they've been going with a bullpen game every 5th day.
Yep.
So imagine how much that innings pitch gap would widen even more if they had 5 starters instead of 4. But yeah, I think Walker going 6 or more every outing, and I feel like it's been the same for almost everyone. Like I know the other guys in the rotation have had shorter starts, but for the most part, they've all given great length,
Yeah.
and that's what's allowed them to do the bullpen games. Because if your other starters are only going 3, 4, 5 innings, then you can't afford to do a bullpen game every 5th day. So I think it's been huge the length he's given. I think it's awesome to see that he's finally he's still really young, but he's becoming to the point where he's a veteran, and you could count on him every 5th day. He's stayed healthy, which is also a good
Yeah.
thing as well. So yeah, credit to Bueller. We've talked previously about how he hasn't been the best this year, but he's battled through it and he's still put up a lot of productive innings.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to say. Like his ability to get length even while not striking guys out at the rate that he was hoping for, I think is a testament to him. And you just kind of hope, well, if he can get those strikeout numbers back up and combine it with what he's been doing already, that's a win-win. Last one here. Dave Roberts asked about Mookie Betts kind of struggling. He said before Sunday's game that Mookie Betts will homer in the next few days. You buying or selling a Mookie Betts home run, let's say in this 3-game series against Pittsburgh. We'll give him an extra day considering he didn't homer on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to be facing the best pitching staff in the world in Pittsburgh, so I'm expecting a few or at least 2 lopsided type games in there. So I'm gonna agree with Dave here. I think Mookie's gonna homer at least once during the Pittsburgh
I'm
series.
with you. I'm going with a Mookie home run in Pittsburgh. I think Dave strategically thought that one through and said, "Oh, we're going to play like the team with one of the worst teams in baseball." Let's do stock
For
up and
sure.
stock down. And I know we're towards the end of the show, and we do want to get to the preview. I know some of your guys may be folks we've already talked about a little bit. I can
Yeah.
start with stock up. I hinted at it. Nate Jones and Phil Bickford. Stock up on these guys. One of the reasons that the Gratterall news is not that big of a deal is because they have
Yep.
two right-handed relievers that are pitching really, really well. Bickford, both these guys combined for 6 2/3 scoreless this past week. Bickford, 3 innings pitched, 1 hit, no walks, 4 strikeouts. He had a rough first appearance. Since then, 6 innings pitched, just 4 hits, 1 walk, no earned runs, 9 strikeouts. So striking out 1.5 batters per 9. Nate Jones' last 4 appearances, 4 1/3, 1 hit, no walks, 2 strikeouts for him. Will Smith was asked about him. Quote, both have really good fastballs. They use their breaking balls to keep you honest. Keep their fastballs where they need to. They're both swing and miss fastballs. Jones used the slider a little bit more and got some swing and miss. Those are 2 big right arms as we've got in the pen. 2 new additions. They're filling a role and helping us out. So shout out to those guys. They've been impressive. You know, we're talking
Yeah.
about, I know we've been disappointed. Oh, Dylan Flora's gone. Pedro Baez is gone. I mean, Nate Jones and Phil Bickford are low leverage guys right now, but they're making me miss Dylan Floro and Pedro Baez less than I was expecting to maybe a month ago.
Yeah, for sure. We've been talking all year about how some of those other guys could just at least be average.
Yeah,
Like we're not even
the
asking too
bar is
much. Just
low.
don't be terrible.
Yeah.
So the fact that these guys are actually doing, above average, they're pitching well. That's good to see. We've talked about the back end guys. They've been great all year. So if you could get even more production behind them, then that just lengthens the bullpen. And Jimmy Nelson coming back, that adds
Yeah.
some more too. So now the Dodgers are
David
at like
Price.
David Price. They're at like five truly trustworthy guys, and then the 2 guys you just mentioned are like 6 and 7. So the bullpen as a whole is looking a lot better.
Well, we'll get to Trinan here in a moment about whether he belongs in
Yeah.
the trustworthy camp, but I'll let you go
Ah,
first.
yeah, we'll get there. My first stock up is Chris Taylor. He had the highest OPS on the team over the last week. I think it was like slightly below 1,000.
Yeah.
He had that to start things off. He had that 14 pitch at bat, then clears the bases. And then in the second win over the Cardinals when they had the big inning, he had he had a bases clearing double, I believe, or a 2-run double in that as well. He's just been consistent all year.
Yeah.
He's moving around, playing wherever is needed. He's filling in for guys with injuries. And he's been great offensively. So this guy, All-Star voting is underway, by the way. So everyone needs to go vote for Chris Taylor because he's absolutely been deserving. He's been everything we thought he could be. He's putting it all together, and he's having his best season as a major leaguer.
Yeah, absolutely. And go vote for Gavin Lux too, just so my bold prediction comes true. Not that he necessarily deserves it, but if we can pencil that one
I
in,
don't know about
we'll go.
that one.
So I'll go stock down again. It's a guy I just mentioned, Blake Trinan. He allowed runs in 3 straight appearances, 3 innings pitched, 5 earned, 5 hits, 3 walks, 4 strikeouts. His walks and hits per inning pitched is up to 1.35 on the season. So that's the bad. Here's the flip side of this. I was looking at his StatCast numbers, Baseball Savant. What are the underlying metrics say? He's elite across the board. 99th percentile in exit velocity, 98th percentile in hard hit, 99th percentile in barrels, 93rd percentile in expected on or weighted on base average, expected ERA, expected slugging, 85th percentile in whiff. He's also 70th or higher in expected batting average, strikeout percentage, chase rate. His walk rate is above average. So he's such a fascinating guy because on one hand, a 1.35 whip is absolutely terrible for a high leverage reliever. The ERA is higher than it should be. 3 straight appearances. Now, I know Dave Roberts said he had a little bit of a groin injury. He was scratched one day. He pitches the next 2 days after that. But I don't know what to make of Trinan. I mean, stock down, he had a rough week. Roberts said this. I think it's a little bit of a lack of command. The stuff is there, but the cutter's been missing. The slider's been in and out, getting behind hitters. When you do that, there's a high probability of giving up some runs. So I know you've been a lot higher on Trinan than I have all season. It sounds like you are not losing faith in him whatsoever. The 1.35 whip is terrifying to me. The StatCast numbers say he's the best reliever the Dodgers have. So I don't know what to make of watching Trinan.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers are what they are. I feel like with relievers, like the ERA, the whip type numbers, like those get skewed. Like if you have 1 or 2 bad outings, which he had this past week, like I bet if you go back a week, the ERA and whip looked a lot better than they did now. So I'd say for the most part, he's been really good this season. He has had a couple hiccups of late. I don't know how much the injury played into that. I don't know how much the lack of substances played into that, because I feel like a lot of people are targeting the starters when it
Yeah,
comes to this stuff too. But relievers
it's fair.
relievers could be very well using them too. Trinan could be. Kenley's another guy whose spin rates have jumped up this season, so he'll be someone to watch moving forward too as well. Um, but yeah, I mean, ideally you want Trinan to his WHIP to be around 1, his ERA to be mid 2s. And they're not right now, but that doesn't mean I still trust him going forward. I think what we see with him is he's either dominant, 1, 2, 3 on 9 pitches, like wow, this guy might be the best reliever in baseball, or it all kind of goes bad and he gives up, 4 hits and
Yeah,
3 runs or whatever. So it's one or the other. And I think obviously the higher percentages on the scoreless outings, like I'd have to go back and look, but I'd venture to guess he has a lot more scoreless outings than outings he's given up runs. So I think that's also something to factor in, with relievers and their stats. They get skewed by bad outings.
yeah,
So I think overall Trinan is very trustworthy, but I'd say obviously you're a little concerned coming off the week he just had.
yeah.
He's one of your high leverage guys. He's arguably next to Kenley. He's the guy you should be trusting most, and he didn't have the best week. But yeah, we'll just have to see going forward. He's someone I'm a little concerned about with the substances. You mentioned the I don't know what his spin rates look like, but a lot of the other advanced metrics have been great this year. So I think overall, still think he's very trustworthy. But we're gonna have to see what he looks like going
Yeah.
forward now that everything's kind of being cleaned up here.
And just to pick up on something you mentioned, so he's had 3 straight where he allowed earned runs. The 10 prior were his best 10 performances. So in the month
Hmm.
of April, he was okay, 3.2 ERA, a handful of outings with earned runs. The first 10 appearances in the month of May, he only allowed base runners in 3 of those appearances. And all of them were scoreless. So he had gone
Hmm.
8.2 scoreless in 10 appearances. Then the last 3, like I said, he's allowed 3 earned runs, 1 earned run, 1 earned run. 2 of those included home runs. He's walked 3 guys. So something to watch there. But yeah, to your point, he
Hmm.
was okay, unbelievable, and pretty bad. Pretty much
Hmm.
the story of the Dodgers season. So
Yeah, right.
2 more for you and 1 more for me. Next up, stock
Yeah.
down for you is who?
My next stock down is Gavin Lux's defense. We talked about at the beginning of the season how great he was at second base. It hasn't been the case since he moved
Mhm.
over to shortstop. I think Mike Petriello just tweeted this morning like he had +7 outs above average at second base, and he's at -6 since he moved to shortstop. Um, and the eye test matches that,
Yeah.
quite frankly. Like those same balls that Seager was struggling with in the 5-6 holes, the backhands, Lux has been struggling with those as well. We saw the pop up in Atlanta where Pollock's coming in. Pollock clearly has it. Lux obviously doesn't hear him call it. They end up running into each other. The ball drops. A couple runs score or whatever. I don't remember exactly, but overall the defense at short from Gavin Lux has not been great. The bat's been up and down. I think he was pretty cold this past week. So I guess overall Gavin Lux stock down,
Yeah.
I'd say, not just the defense. But yeah, I mean that's something that you hope when Seager gets back and he moves back to second, he could get back to playing that really good defense. But overall, like I feel like the biggest concern with Lux, kind of over the last couple years has been his defense, specifically at shortstop. That's the main reason why they wanted to move him over to
Yeah.
second base. So I think we're kind of seeing that now. And I think there were some people, right when Seager went down and Lux was playing well, that were like, oh yeah, like we got our shortstop. We don't need to pay Seager the 300 plus million or whatever. I haven't heard that as much over the
Yeah.
last couple weeks. Let me just say that.
I was going to say this was kind of an audition that has not gone perfectly, and there were some people. I think it was Craig Goldstein of Baseball Prospectus who kind of responded and say, "Hey, that's a small sample size, and some of those numbers
Yeah.
are probably skewed by some hard hit balls, that kind of thing." But yeah, he clearly has not taken it and run with it in the way that those folks might have hoped for. If anything, Corey Seager's leverage has gone up; it has not gone down over this stretch.
Hmm.
My last one, I'll just throw a couple at you. Mookie Betts actually had a good week, 942 OPS. I know, again, it doesn't feel like that necessarily because he had a couple really good games and some no-shows, it felt like. And then a couple guys with rough ones stock down. Zach McKinstry, 350 OPS over the last week. Will Smith, 485. So Need more out of Will Smith for sure. He's been really good this season. I mean, he's been unspectacular, but he's been consistently solid. McKinstry, I think people, again, I think we probably overinflated McKinstry's abilities by the start to the year that he had. I'm not saying he's nearly as bad as he has been right now. I think he's a step up over the Peters and the Noiseys and those types of guys who were called up, but he doesn't look like it right now. So we'll see how much of a leash he gets to kind of figure that out. I think he's going to be a bench guy. But at some point, when Seager and does come back, the Dodgers are going to have to make a decision on the end of their bench. And, if McKinstry doesn't pick it up, he's a lot easier to send to the minors than a guy like Yoshi, who they'd have to actually release. So something to watch there. Last one for you.
My last one was Clayton Kershaw. We talked a lot about him already. So yeah, I'm not going to go into depth anymore. Let's just hope he turns it around moving forward.
Okay, well, let's close out the show then with a preview of the week ahead. We kind of hinted at it. They get 3 games in Pittsburgh, then 3 games at home against Texas with an off day Monday. I love the off day while you're on a road trip. I wonder, in my head, I think that's probably really good for team morale. They fly from Atlanta to Pittsburgh. They have nothing to do today. They just get to hang out together, relax a little bit, catch your breath. Probably exactly what this team needs. Walker Buehler, presumably Tony Gonsolin, and Julio Urias, the starters against Pittsburgh. As I said, Pittsburgh has the second worst record in the National League. They're 23-35. They have the worst run differential in all of baseball. Should be a fun series in Pittsburgh. And then in Texas, Kershaw, Bauer, and Buehler at home against the Rangers. The Rangers have the second worst record in the American League. Another 23-win team, 23-38. So they're even worse than Pittsburgh. Anything you're looking for here other than the Dodgers needing to win no less than 4 out of these 6 games?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing to look for is let's see how Tony Gonsolin looks in his season debut. I think a lot of people thought going into his last rehab start, he'd try to stretch it out to like 5 innings, 80 pitches or whatever, but he ended up only going like 3.1 and 60 pitches. So we're not exactly sure how built he up, is he going to go 4 innings? Is he going to be able to go 5? So I guess we'll just wait and see. I guess it is kind of a soft landing spot for him facing the Pirates in his season debut. You just threw out all the numbers. They're not very good. So you said 4 out of 6. That's the bare minimum for me. They should take 5 out of 6 or even win all 6. These are not very good teams. We got a full starting rotation now. We got, for the most part, our starting lineup is all back outside of Seager. I combined
Muncie.
Starting and Seager there for Steger, but outside of Seager, everyone's back. We got a full team. We got a full rotation. Our bullpen's looking good. So this should be the week they put it all together, win 5 or 6 games.
It is true. I mean, when you look at guys that you're expecting to get back, obviously Dustin May is done for the year. I keep thinking Corey Knebel is done for the year. If you consider that, Corey Seager is the only guy that they currently don't have who sort of is part of their core team. So yeah, I mean, obviously, as I mentioned, Max Muncy, we don't know what his status is. He could end up on the IL. I mean, I'm slightly worried about Chris Taylor fouling a ball off of his knee. I'm hopeful that doesn't result in a in sort of a day-to-day injured list type thing. We haven't heard anything. Nobody asked Dave Roberts about it on Sunday that I could remember. So I'm with you. 4 is the bare minimum. 3 on the road in Pittsburgh. That's not a challenge, but 3 at home against Texas. I'm almost expecting you need a sweep there. You need Kershaw, Bauer, and Buehler at home against the Rangers. Like anything less than 3 wins there is a little disappointing. So we'll see what happens there. Well, hey, that'll do it. Big show for us today, so we appreciate you watching. As always, make sure you check out DodgerBlue.com for the latest. Daniel and I will be back later this week with the live post-game show for one of those games in Texas. And then next week, just a note, schedule change. This Monday one, I'm going to be out on Monday during the day, so we'll figure out what we're going to do with that, whether we record it late at night. Maybe we'll do a live post-game on Monday night. So TBD there. Stay tuned for that. But we appreciate you as always. That's Daniel Starkand. I'm Jeff Spiegel. Enjoy the rest of your week. And again, hopefully we come back a week from now, the Dodgers having won 5 out of 6 against 2 of the worst teams in baseball.
The best team holding a trophy high in the air. The Los Angeles Dodgers, champions of the baseball world.